We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys, I'm back after a month. The video for today will be the part 2 of What If Naruto Traveled to the World of Harry Potter. The trust of a child is a fragile thing. Naruto becomes disenchanted with Konoha and the Sandaime Hokage when he stumbles upon the truth of who and what he is on his 8th birthday. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 5, Temper. Thursday, August 5, 1999, early evening. Hogsmeade Village, Scotland. Harry whistled a merry tune as he dusted the soot from his dress robes, waved cheerfully to Madame Rosmerta, and made his way out of the 3 broomsticks to meet Ginny at Madame Putafoot's tea shop. In his pocket he carried a velvet box that held a rather expensive diamond engagement ring. The 19-year-old wizard intended to propose to his long-time girlfriend. He wasn't really ready to propose, but he was feeling pressured by the entire Weasley family, mostly by Ginny herself, and he figured an early and subsequently long engagement, since he was due to start Auror training in less than a month, would at least get them off his back. He'd barely gone 5 steps past the pub's front door when an eagle owl dropped down out of the sky with a screech and began circling his head. Harry frowned as he offered his arm to the agitated bird the moment he saw the envelope it held clutched in its beak. The bird landed but refused to release the letter it held until Harry paid the postage fee, a huge red stamp declaring the amount of postage due emblazoned on the front of the envelope. Harry stuffed the required 2 sickles and 8 nuts into the pouch the owl had tied to its leg before tossing the bird off into the air once it had relinquished the letter it had brought him. A glance at the return address on the front of the envelope had the green-eyed wizard arching an eyebrow in surprise, with the other eyebrow joining the first when he noticed the word urgent had been scrawled messily beneath his name on the front. His brow then furrowed as he tried to think of any reason why his cousin would contact him. They weren't exactly friends after all, especially about something that the other teen thought needed to be addressed immediately. Shrugging his shoulders, Harry checked the time to make certain he wasn't late for his date before he leaned against the wall, ripped open the envelope, and pulled out the short letter inside that had been dated some 3 days earlier. Harry, I need your help. A man showed up today with a kid that claims he's related to us, and Mum freaked out really bad. The man disappeared and left the kid behind, and Mum's gone and locked him in your old cupboard, all the while ranting on about freaks and monsters and how she won't have another in the house. I need you to come fetch the kid before Mum and Dad hurt him. I'm going to spring him once they've gone to sleep, but I don't know how long I can hide him before they realize what I've done, and I don't have anywhere else I can take him right now. So, please contact me as soon as possible and let me know if you can take him or not. Dudley. Harry paled in concern as he sprang away from the wall before fury surged through him at the thought of Petunia and Vernon potentially treating another child the way they'd treated him. All thoughts of his date and the ring sitting heavy in his pocket were forgotten as he spun around on his heel and apparat directly into the backyard of No. 4 Privet Drive. His holly wand practically jumped into his hand as he stormed up to the back door. When he reached the door, Harry didn't even bother to knock as he blasted the door open with a flick of his wand, startling both his aunt and uncle as the door slammed open hard enough to crack it in half. Get out! Get out! Get out! Petunia shrieked the moment she caught sight of Harry dressed in elaborate wizard's robes with his wand out and in plain sight. Put a sock in it, you dried-up old hag, Harry snapped as he flicked his wand at the woman and silenced her before he knocked her back into the chair with a weak banishing charm and wrapped her up in ropes. Vernon received the same treatment when the man made to charge at Harry. I'm not exactly in the best of moods right now, so you'll need to forgive me if I'm a little short with you, because I had to jump all the way down here from Scotland in order to protect another innocent from your sick and twisted perception of normal. The 2 of you had better not have harmed a single hair on the kid's head, or so help me I will personally teach you a lesson you won't soon forget. If you didn't want to take him in or have anything to do with him, all you had to do was contact me and I would have gladly come to collect him, or you could have allowed him to leave. I'm not surprised that you resorted to your freakishly unnatural behavior though, seeing as how terribly you treated me for years before you began to fear that I would use what I learned to pay you back for all of the abuse. At that point, Dudley burst into the room carrying a cricket bat. The bigger teen immediately skidded to a halt and lowered the bat he held the instant he recognized Harry standing in the middle of the kitchen. The blonde sagged as he gave Harry a shaky smile and declared, "Boy, am I ever glad to see you, Harry. I was beginning to fear that you wouldn't get my letter in time and Dad was planning to take the kid and dump him in a river this weekend." Vernon's eyes bugged out and he began thrashing about in his bindings over that small revelation. Harry scowled at the man before hitting him with a stunner to prevent the man from giving himself a heart attack. "I dropped everything and rushed straight here right after I got your letter just a few minutes ago," Harry explained as he lifted his left hand to show the crumpled letter and envelope in question. "Where's this mysterious little cousin your letter mentioned? Were you able to get him out of the cupboard?" "Naruto is upstairs in my room. I told him to hide when we heard the door burst open since I wasn't exactly expecting you to show up with a bang tonight. And, yeah, I busted him out of the cupboard on the first night. I couldn't stand the thought of him having to stay in there like you did." "Glad to hear it. If you'll go fetch him for me, since he knows you already, I'll just explain a few things to my favorite aunt and uncle while I wait for you. I know you don't like them much but don't hurt them, they aren't worth it, Harry. I don't plan on it, but I will be altering their memories so that they'll forget all about the kid and so that they don't give you grief about breaking him out or contacting me. Don't bother, let them keep their memories. I was planning on moving into the flat that my girlfriend and I are in the process of leasing soon, and once she hears about what they were going to do to our little cousin, she'll insist I move in with her family now. I've already packed up most of my stuff while I was waiting for you to reply to my letter. I would have just taken Naruto with me to my girlfriend's, but there just isn't room at her parents' tiny place and their landlord is a right Burke. If you'd like, I can give you a hand packing up the rest of your stuff," Harry offered as the worst of his anger began fading now that he knew the kid hadn't been hurt. "You wouldn't mind?" "Not in the least, so long as you don't mind me using my freaky hocus pocus to help." Dudley laughed weakly over the rather poor joke before he replied, "Come on up to my room then and I'll introduce you to Naruto at the same time. And, no, I don't mind if you use a bit of magic, so long as I don't end up with another tail or overlarge tongue." Harry snorted in return before he nodded and flicked his wand at Petunia once more to knock her out for the moment as he trailed out of the kitchen after Dudley. As they moved down the hall, Harry scowled at the cupboard under the stairs and flicked his wand at the door that was locked shut with at least 25 locks, including a few padlocks, turning the door to sawdust and the locks to puddles of metal. Dudley jumped in surprise in response to the unexpected show of magic before he snickered over the resulting mess. Just a couple of minutes later, Harry slowed to a stop in the doorway leading into Dudley's room as the taller teen called out to the well-hidden child, "Hey, Naruto, you can come on out now, there's nothing to worry about." Harry arrived just now with a bit more bang than expected. A head of sunshine yellow hair poked up from beneath the bed and Harry soon found himself looking into a pair of worried deep blue eyes set into a lightly tanned face that sported a trio of whisker marks on each cheek. Harry had only a few seconds to inspect the kid before his attention was drawn back to Dudley as the other teen provided introductions. "Harry, meet Naruto Evans, our 8-year-old cousin from Grandpa Evans' side of the family. Naruto, this here is Harry Potter, he'll be taking you somewhere safer than here. If that's alright with both of you." "I wouldn't be here otherwise," Harry automatically replied as he continued his earlier inspection. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Naruto, though I wish I could have spared you the trouble of dealing with Petunia and Vernon's pettiness. You don't look anything like like Uncle Gregory," Naruto accused with a slight frown. "Ah, that would be because I'm the spitting image of my father aside from my eyes. I got my eyes from my mum." "Oh. Where are you going to take me and what are you going to do with me?" "We'll be staying at the Burrow with the Weasleys, Hermione, and Teddy. You can bunk with Teddy in the temporary nursery for tonight and Mrs. Weasley will love having another kid around to mother. We'll figure out what happens after that in a few days once we've had a chance to get to know one another." "Who are Teddy, Hermione and the Weasels?" "Hermione is the smartest person I know and my very best friend, Mrs. Weasley, and the rest of the Weasleys are very close friends of mine in my second family, and Teddy is my godson." "How old is Teddy? Does he live with you?" "Teddy is only 15 months old and yes, he now lives with me full-time. His parents died shortly after he was born and his grandmother's health recently took a turn for the worst a month and a half ago and she is too sick to take care of him anymore. We should probably get moving though, before the 2 old windbags downstairs wake up and give me another headache with their perpetual belly aching." "Where are your things? Did Petunia or Vernon take them and lock them up somewhere?" They never touched my stuff and everything I have is in my backpack. That's good, I was worried they might have destroyed your things. If you'll come stand over here against the wall by me where you'll be out of the way, I'll help Dudley pack the last of his things before we head out. Where did you want me to put everything, Dudders, and did you want me to pack the furniture for you as well? I have the boxes over here and you'd better leave the furniture. Mom and Dad will be mad enough about me moving out and helping the two of you. I think it would be best not add thieving to the list of my crimes right now. Alright, best move back a bit, Harry instructed as he stepped into the center of the room. He then concentrated on gathering all of Dudley's belongings as he snapped his wand hand sharply and firmly ordered, pack. Naruto and Dudley both gasped simultaneously as everything in the room, and several items that were not in the room, jumped up off the floor, crawled out of the various furniture, and flew through the air before tucking themselves into the indicated boxes. 3 minutes later, the room was bare of everything bar the furniture and a small stack of boxes had been sealed shut and neatly stacked beside the door. Sugoi! Naruto exclaimed as his eyes danced with excitement. Harry gave the kid a dramatic bow as he grinned at the kid's enthusiasm before he straightened up as a thoughtful look crossed over his face. He then called out 3 summoning charms in a row, Accio Harry Potter's property. Accio Lily Evans' property. Accio Lily Potter's property. Moments later, following on the heels of a few loud bangs and crashes, several boxes, a couple of trunks, and a number of pieces of jewelry zoomed into the room to land in a pile at Harry's feet. I had hoped I was wrong, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that Petunia hoarded things that rightfully belonged to me and my mother. The wizard quickly shrank the boxes and trunks and tucked everything into his pocket before he turned to address Dudley one last time. Thank you for thinking of contacting me, Dudley. You'll have to send me your new address once you get settled so we can get together and catch up over tea sometime. I'm sure Naruto here would like to keep in touch with his savior as well. I'd like that, Dudley stated as he walked up to Harry and offered the wizard his hand. I appreciate you dropping everything like you did to help the two of us out. Not a problem, anything for family. Speaking of which, your parents should wake up in a few hours and the silencing charms will eventually wear off on their own. I'll send them a howler to yell at them some more later, since I didn't get to say everything I planned to say before you interrupted my rant. Are you ready to go, Naruto? Do you need a lift into London? I'll be going that way anyway since my girl lives on the northern side of town. Thanks for the offer, but we're actually headed in the opposite direction, so we'll just take the night bus to Ottery St. Catchpole. I'll see the two of you later then, Dudley replied as he turned from Harry to ruffle Naruto's hair. Take care of yourself, runt. Naruto grinned and hugged Dudley around the waist before he bounced over to Harry, his earlier reluctance and distrust no longer evident in his eyes. Harry chuckled and felt the last of the worry that had been knotting his chest since he'd received Dudley's note unwind with the knowledge that his little cousin, and how strange it was to learn he'd had even more relatives out there, had not been harmed thanks to Dudley's intervention. The green-eyed wizard then led the way through the house and took a moment to cast a dust magnet jinx and an ant attraction charm on the house, to torment his aunt for a week or two until the magic in the spells faded, as they boldly walked out the front door. He then took perverse satisfaction in purposefully walking on the lawn, completely ignoring the walkway, and through the flower beds that lined the driveway. It was childish and petty of him, but he didn't really care right that moment. Once they reached the sidewalk, Harry glanced down at the kid walking beside him as he wondered how the kid had ended up at the Dursleys in the first place and where his parents were. Figuring that it would be best to save his questions until the kid felt a little more comfortable with him, Harry shelved that line of thinking as he automatically snagged Naruto's hand with his when they reached the end of Privet Drive and crossed over to Magnolia Crescent. He felt Naruto jump in surprise the moment their hands connected, and Harry looked down in concern only to find the kid beaming up at him with bright blue eyes. Harry offered a smile in return as he guided the boy towards the empty and somewhat rundown park where he'd once taunted Dudley during the summer between his 4th and 5th years at Hogwarts. Once they arrived outside of the park, Harry glanced up and down the street and at each of the houses that were close by before he stuck out his wand to call the night bus. The garish purple bus appeared with a bang just a few minutes later, and Naruto jumped and ducked behind Harry before peeking around to stare at the huge contraption with wide eyes. Sorry about that, Naruto, I forgot how startling the night bus can be if you aren't expecting it. Harry apologized as the doors to the bus opened and a young woman in her late 20s stepped down to greet them. Welcome to the night bus, emergency transportation for the stranded witch or wizard, *. Evening, 1 adult and 1 child for the borough in Ottery St. Catchpole, Harry stated in a slightly strained voice as the memory of the last time he'd seen Stan Shunpike, the former conductor of the night bus, flashed before his eyes. The gossip-loving wizard glassy-eyed under the influence of the Imperious curse as he chased after Harry and Hagrid on Voldemort's orders the night he'd left Privet Drive, just before his 17th birthday. The man had not survived that night. He'd been cut down by another Death Eater's killing curse when he got in the way at the last second. That'll be 15 sickles, 19 sickles if you want us to include 2 cups of hot chocolate, and 23 sickles for a pair of water bottles and 2 toothbrushes in your choices of colors. Harry passed over a single galleon and accepted 2 sickles back in change. The 19-year-old knew better than to buy a drink while using the night bus, and he had no need for extra toothbrushes. He then shuffled Naruto up to the empty second level before the witch recognized him and warned the kid to hold on tight as they sat down on a single bed. The 8-year-old stared at him funny until the magical bus jumped into motion with a loud bang and the kid nearly flipped backwards off the bed due to the unexpected jolt. Once he got over his shock, Naruto whooped with glee each time the bus jumped locations and their bed flew across the floor to crash into the other beds or the walls of the bus. The young war veteran felt the knot of grief and guilt he'd been carrying around for the last 2 years ease a touch as he watched his young cousin finding pleasure in something as simple as shifting beds, much as it did when he spent time with Teddy. The pout Naruto adopted when their stop was announced over an hour later made Harry chuckle as they trooped down the stairs and climbed down off the bus. The bus vanished with a loud crack almost as soon as they were off. "Can we ride the purple bus again, Potter-san?" Naruto inquired as he bounced excitedly on the balls of his feet and stared at the place where the night bus had been sitting, just seconds earlier. "You can call me Harry," Harry absently stated as he grinned at the 8-year-old in bemusement. "And I can guarantee that we'll ride the night bus fairly frequently when it is just you and I traveling from place to place as you are a bit too young for me to take you with me when I apparate and Teddy is far too young to ride the bus." "Cool," Naruto crowed as he jumped up and punched the air before he glanced around at the rather empty countryside where they'd been dropped off in the middle of a dirt lane. "Oh no, Pot. Harry-san, were we supposed to end up in the middle of nowhere?" "Yes, the burrow, which just so happens to be one of my 3 most favorite places to be, is just a 10-minute walk down the lane." "What does the word you keep saying after my name mean?" Catherine-sensei called it an honorifice and a sign of respect. "She also said it is the same as saying Mr. or Mrs. in English," Naruto answered as he stumbled over the pronunciation of the word honorific. "Oh, in that case, you don't have to add san to my name. I'd much prefer it if you just called me plain old Harry," Harry insisted as he led Naruto towards the burrow. "I've heard the word sensei used before. It means teacher, doesn't it?" "Yes." "Do you know some Japanese then?" "Not really, I just know a few words that I picked up from the shows that Dudley used to watch when he was younger." "Do you speak Japanese fluently?" "Yeah, I was born just outside of Japan. I didn't start learning English until earlier this year when I met Naoki Gigi." "Really? You speak the language very well for someone who just started learning it." "Thanks," Naruto murmured shyly while a light flush of pleased embarrassment colored his face. The kid's jaw then dropped to his knees as the burrow came into sight. "That house is falling over." "It sure looks that way, doesn't it?" "I know I thought the same thing the first time I saw the burrow, but it's been standing for decades now." "Don't let its appearance bother you too much, it's much stuttier than it looks," Harry declared as he let them in through the gate and directed the blonde towards the kitchen door, the chickens scattering as the two of them crossed the yard. Anything else Harry might have said about the burrow was lost and forgotten as an angry redhead burst out of the house and aimed a verbal explosion at the wizard. "Harry James Potter, just what the bloody hell did you think you were doing standing me up for our date tonight and completely humiliating in front of everyone? Do you know how embarrassing it was to sit in Madame Putafoot's for an hour and a half waiting for a boyfriend who never bothered to show up?" Ginny demanded as she brandished her wand beneath Harry's nose, sparks trickling from the tip and singeing his sensitive nose hairs. "I've half a mind to curse you from here to Hogwarts and back for what you put me through tonight." Oh. Harry meeped as his eyes got really wide. He'd forgotten all about Ginny in his rush to save his cousin. "I'm so sorry, Ginny, I completely forgot about our date after reading the urgent letter Dudley had sent me. There was a small family emergency. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses, Harry Potter." Ginny hissed as she forced Harry to back up a step by jabbing him in the chest several times with her wand. You could at least have the decency to tell me the truth instead of making up lies about your muggle cousin when we both know you hate the Dursleys almost as much as they hate you, and they'd never send you so much as a Christmas card, let alone an owl. Now just 1 minute, Harry cut back, angry that his girlfriend had just called him a liar when he'd never once lied to her about anything, his eyes cutting to the nervous blonde that had backed away from the loud and very angry redhead to make certain the kid wasn't in the line of fire. You've no business accusing me of lying. You damn well know that I've never lied to you about anything, even if I did withhold information during and after the war. I went to Privet Drive the moment I learned that my aunt and uncle had gone round the twist when another cousin popped out of the woodwork unexpectedly and collected Naruto, before they could hurt him any more than they already had. Ginny turned to take note of Naruto for the first time since she'd barreled out of the door to verbally lay into Harry, and her eyes narrowed the instant she saw just how young the kid was and the fact that there were no other adults present as she demanded, "Where are the little brat's parents?" Harry scowled briefly over the barely disguised venom he heard in his girlfriend's voice before his expression morphed into a puzzled frown as he again wondered just where his cousin's parents were. He then turned his questioning gaze to the blonde in the hopes Naruto would clue him into the mystery of his absent parents. He grew concerned when he saw the pained expression on the child's face, and he almost knew exactly what the kid was going to say before he said it. "I'm an orphan. I came to England looking for the only family I have left alive. I didn't think Petunia would hate me the second she saw me. Forget about that spiteful old hag. She's not worth your tears, and she treats everyone and everything like trash if they don't fit her idea of perfectly normal. You're more than welcome to stay with me for as long as you wish, and if you need anything, you only have to ask." "Really?" Naruto asked in surprise as he stared up at Harry with disbelief and hope. Of course, Harry began only for Mount Ginevra to explode a second time. "Oh, no, absolutely not. I was willing to tolerate you saddling me with your snotty little godson without discussing it with me first, but at least he has magic unlike the little lost squib you let tag along with you tonight. He didn't even register on the wards when the two of you stepped on the property. I refuse to stay home to watch over two brats that aren't even mine when I have a pending contract with the Holyhead Harpies." "Excuse me?" Harry asked in shock as the revelation that Ginny was apparently just as prejudiced when it came to those that were born without magic as the pureblood bigots he'd been up against during the war. "And to top it off, it'll be all over the papers tomorrow how you jilted me on the night you were supposed to propose to me. Do you have any idea what kinds of terrible things they are going to say about me tomorrow? You'd better not have cost me my contract with the Harpies with your fool stunt. Who told you I was supposed to propose tonight?" Harry demanded softly as he focused on the most recent turn the argument had taken, his mind still not able to wrap itself around the idea that his girlfriend not only thought squibs were beneath her but that she wanted nothing to do with his godson and his youngest cousin. "Last I knew, my decision on whether or not I asked you to marry me tonight was nothing I discussed with you and was meant to be a surprise. Of course I knew you would ask me. Ron told me that you'd finally stopped dragging your feet and bought my ring weeks ago. Why do you think I set our date for Putafoots and let all my friends know before I sent a tip to the Daily Prophet so the night my dreams came true could be properly documented and everyone would finally realize that the boy who lived was mine?" Harry's insides froze as he heard that Ginny had intended to make a public spectacle of what was meant to be a private moment just so she could gloat about how she'd claimed the famous boy who lived. His eyes narrowed and turned a darker shade of green in anger as he coldly hissed, "So the truth comes out. Little Ginny Weasley is still nothing but a little fangirl looking to one-up all of the other fans out there that hope to claim possession of the famous Harry Potter and his considerable fortune. And that's on top of being one of the very bigots that I fought against in the war, attacking children with her spiteful and cruel words without a care for whose feelings she's trampling. You seem to have forgotten that those two orphan boys you are determined to hate are my family." Ginny's face paled as her eyes widened in fear before narrowing again in anger as she stubbornly jutted out her chin and delivered an ultimatum. "I don't have to take your attitude, Mr. Potter, until you can treat me with the respect I deserve, and until you get rid of both brats, I don't want to see your face." "That suits me just fine," Harry retorted in an even colder voice as he straightened up and glared at the red-headed witch with frozen emerald eyes. "Consider us well and truly over because family will always come first, and you've made it perfectly clear that you don't want to be part of my family. You simply wanted me to be a prize you can dangle on your arm. Come on, Naruto, we wouldn't want our presence to sully Miss Weasley's delicate sensibility. Where the hell do you think you're going?" Ginny screeched when Harry stepped around her and steered Naruto towards the open kitchen door where three pale faces had observed the entire unfolding drama. In case it escaped your notice, my personal effects are currently sitting in the room I share with your brother, and I will need to collect both them and my godson before I take my cousin home and reassure him that the entire world isn't filled with selfish little harpies like you and my Aunt Petunia. Harry stepped into the house that he'd considered a second home for about 7 or 8 years now as the individual standing in the door fell away to allow him entrance. He kept one hand protectively on Naruto's shoulder as he felt the kid trembling with emotion. Harry suspected that Ginny's words had hurt the kid deeply. "Harry, I'm not sure what to say," Arthur murmured in a pained voice as he helplessly gestured to the fuming Ginny who was still standing out in the middle of the yard where Harry had left her. "You don't have to say anything, Mr. Weasley, that wasn't your fault, and to tell you the truth, I think tonight's fight was a long time coming. Your daughter and I changed too much during the war, and whatever it was that Ginny and I had back in my 6th year was long gone before we got back together last summer. I won't hold the things she said tonight against the rest of the family. I realized that most of it was just her temper speaking. It was partly my fault anyway. I should have at least had the forethought to send her a message before I took off to rescue my cousin from my relatives. Are you going to be all right, Harry?" Hermione asked worriedly as she helped Harry gather up Teddy's things that were spread about the living room. "I'll be fine," Harry assured her as he purposefully cut his eyes down towards the quiet kid sticking close to his side as the kid's blue eyes darted every which way as he took in the organized disorder of the burrow. "Where will you and the boys go, dear?" Molly inquired fretfully as she wrung her hands and glanced between Harry and stairs leading up to the room where little Teddy had recently been tucked into bed. The matronly woman had grown fond of the toddler over the past month. "We'll head to Grimmauld Place for tonight at least. Creature's been cleaning the place up because I was thinking about selling the old place. I'll pack some food for you and the children," Molly immediately insisted upon hearing that before she bustled off to the kitchen to bang the pots and pans around in her distress as she packed up the leftovers from supper. Harry sighed and headed upstairs with Naruto in tow so that he could pack up his things and the rest of Teddy's things from the nursery into his old trunk. The subdued blonde perked up a bit when Harry lifted Teddy up out of his cot after checking the kid's nappy, and Harry smiled as he gestured for Naruto to come closer as he crouched down so the kid could get his first look at the sleeping toddler in his arms. "He's got bright blue hair," Naruto blurted out as he reached out to touch said hair as if to determine whether or not it was real. True blue hair, not a color often seen in Konoha, Mizuki-sensei's being the closest, and his was more of a pale blue-gray than a true blue. "Yes, for now his hair is blue," Harry replied with a soft laugh. "Blue means he's happy. When he's upset his hair turns red, completely white if he's scared, and a dark orange when he's hungry. And when he's being held by someone he likes, his hair and eyes will match the color of their hair and eyes perfectly." "Really? That is so cool. Does that mean he has a Kekii Genkai? What is that?" "I don't know what it means in English, but a Kekii Genkai is a kind of special ability that runs in families." "Ah, then yes, Teddy's ability to change his appearance is like one of those Keki things. His mother had the same ability and she could make herself look like just about anybody. She once made herself look just like me. Teddy doesn't really have any control over the ability right now because he's still just a baby though." "Cool." Harry chuckled in agreement as he stood back up before he leaned down to grab the handle of his trunk and gestured for Naruto to lead the way back down the stairs. The wizard immensely pleased to see the kid opening back up so quickly after Harry's fight with Ginny and the terrible things she'd said about him. Molly attempted to press a heavy hamper filled to the bursting with all kinds of food into Harry's already filled hands as the three of them reached the ground floor, only for Naruto to spring forward to catch the basket before it dropped, the older witch still far too upset to realize what she was doing. "I already popped down to the pub in town and called a cab to take the three of you up to London," Hermione announced as she tucked Teddy's shrunken diaper bag into Harry's pocket. "Do you have enough cash on hand to pay for the fare, or do you need me to loan you some?" "Thanks, Hermione, you're a lifesaver as usual. And I have more than enough cash on hand to pay for the cab. I've made a habit of keeping a couple £100 on me since Andy signed custody of Teddy over to me because he's still too young for me to travel with the usual way." "You're welcome, Harry, and if the three of you need anything, I'm just a phone call away," Hermione insisted before she turned her attention to Naruto and gave him a smile that was tinged with a bit of regret. "I look forward to meeting you properly the next time I see you, young man." Harry thanked his friend again as she gave him and Teddy both a kiss on the cheek before the three boys were out the door and heading back up the lane to wait for the taxi to arrive. Thankfully, Ginny was nowhere in sight as Harry had no desire to fight with her again while he was holding his godson and his wand hand was occupied with his trunk. Chapter 6, A Strange End to a Strange Day. Thursday, August 5, 1999, evening. Number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England. Naruto hesitantly climbed out of the taxi as he watched his cousin pay the driver. He wasn't quite certain what to think anymore after the week he'd just had. He knew it would have been far worse if Dudley hadn't snuck him out of the closet, but it had been bad enough having to duck under the bed every time footsteps sounded on the stairs just in case the door to Dudley's room opened, lest his older cousin or her husband catch him out of the closet. This evening had been a real doozy though. He'd been eating a ham sandwich that Dudley had brought him when it sounded like an explosion had been set off downstairs and he'd been torn between panic and curiosity as he'd heard his cousin shrieking at someone else before she suddenly went silent. His sensitive ears had then picked up the angry retort of an unfamiliar man and he'd almost grinned to hear the man call Petunia a hag. It was at that point that Dudley had urged him to hide as the older boy left the room to investigate the disturbance. The muted conversation he'd listened to after that had been kind of hard to follow and before he could puzzle things out, he'd heard footsteps climbing up the stairs and heading for the room. Not long after that, the 8-year-old had gotten his first look at the mysterious Harry that Dudley had mentioned repeatedly since his cousin had let him out of the closet. The boy looked nothing like a Namikaze with his coal black hair and dark leaf green eyes, and Naruto had half feared that he might have offended the older boy after he'd blurted that fact out. The cousin he hadn't even known existed, since the boy hadn't been included in Naoki's files, hadn't seemed to mind at all though as he smilingly explained that he'd taken after his father in looks before readily answering all of Naruto's other questions. The news that the teen, who didn't look anywhere near as old as Dudley even though Dudley had said they were almost the same age, was taking care of his godson was an encouraging revelation as anyone who would take in someone else's child to raise couldn't be all bad, especially when he spoke of said child with such obvious fondness. Or, at least, so he hoped. Harry had even shown open concern for Naruto and his things, something that had taken the 8-year-old aback since few people ever showed that level of concern for him. The cool jutsu that Harry had used to make all of Dudley's things pack themselves into the boxes and the one he'd used to fetch the things from other rooms had Naruto excited as he'd never seen anything like that before. The apparent evidence that Harry had been partially trained in the shinobi arts had him hopeful that he could openly train with the older boy, something he'd not been able to do since he'd first shown up at Petunia's house, and that Harry would teach him those cool jutsu. Things had started looking up at that point and things had gotten even better after they boarded the ugly purple bus that had appeared out of nowhere. That had been fun. Next time he was so going to see if he could jump beds every time they bounced about. The only reason he hadn't tried it earlier tonight was because he didn't know Harry well enough to predict how the man would react and he really hadn't wanted to make Harry angry with him right off the bat. Sadly, just when it seemed like things were going better than he had ever hoped, Harry being much as he'd imagined his uncle would be like, Harry's girlfriend had ruined everything as she immediately started yelling at Harry. The news that Harry had stood the girl up just to come get him made Naruto feel bad because he'd ruined his cousin's night, but at the same time it made him feel warm and fuzzy inside because his cousin had cared enough to come get him despite the fact that he'd already had plans and had never met Naruto before. The rest of the fight had just been scary once Naruto had been insulted by the violent girl after he'd admitted his parents were dead and Harry offered to let him stay as long as he wanted. Naruto learned another important thing that night: he never wanted Harry furious with him. A furious Harry was a terrifying Harry as he'd gone all cold and quiet like, not like the heated anger he'd heard in Harry's voice when he'd been talking to Petunia after he'd first arrived at his cousin's home. "Come on, Squirt," Harry called from where he was standing between two of the large houses that lined the street. "Which one is your house, Harry?" Naruto asked as he glanced towards where he saw the number 11 hanging from the house on the left before he turned to eye the number 13 on the house to the right. "Number 12. But there isn't a number 12, Naruto pointed out as he scrunched up his face in confusion and studied the two houses again. "That house has the number 11 and the other one has the number 13. "Ah, but 12 always sits between 11 and 13, even if you can't see it, you know it's there because that is where it belongs." "Ah no." Harry chuckled as he shifted Teddy into his other arm so he could drop his hand on Naruto's shoulder in order to guide him between the two houses. They'd barely taken 2 steps when another house suddenly grew out of the ground in the blink of an eye and shoved numbers 11 and 13 apart, and Naruto couldn't help but gape at the rusted number 12 half hanging off from the wall beside the front porch. "See, right where it was supposed to be," Harry cheekily pointed out as he stepped back to collect his trunk from the curb while Naruto continued to stare up at the newly appeared house in awe. "That was so cool. Is there a barrier around the house that makes it so other people can't see it until they step through it?" Naruto inquired as he eagerly followed Harry onto the porch, the 8-year-old immediately thinking the house had been hiding under seals of some kind. "Sort of. We call them wards, and the ones around number 12 Grimmauld Place are designed to hide the house from everyone who doesn't already know the house exists, and the only people that can bring someone new to this house are those that already know about it. There aren't that many people left that know how to find the house though, so we'll have plenty of privacy for as long as we stay here." "I'm sorry I ruined everything for you with your girlfriend, Potter-san." "Don't apologize for Ginny," Harry retorted in a mildly irritated tone, but Naruto didn't know if he was irritated with him or if it was the topic he was irritated with. Clarification came a moment later. "The only person responsible for Ginny is Ginny, and we've been having trouble for the last year. So it was not your fault I broke up with her tonight. And I thought I asked you to call me Harry. But she wouldn't have been mad at you if you hadn't had to come get me instead of going on your date." "Ah, no, that was my fault. I should have sent her a message to let her know I couldn't make our date, but according to what I learned from Ginny about what she set up tonight, I think you saved me from something far worse than getting yelled at by a red-headed harpy." "Ano, what do you mean?" Naruto demanded in confusion as they stepped inside of the house where they came face to face with a short, demonic creature with huge eyes and bigger ears. "And what in the world is that?" "He is a house elf, Naruto, and his name is Creature," Harry explained as Naruto eyed the strange creature. "Creature, will you please take my trunk upstairs to the bedroom that I used the last time I was here and prepare the 2 rooms on either side of my room for Naruto and Teddy. We'll be staying here for a while. Does Master Harry wish for Creature to make supper for him and his guests?" Creature asked in a gravely voice. "No, Mrs. Weasley sent some leftovers home with us. They're in the basket Naruto is holding. If you'll set the dining room and warm them up, then we'll have those tonight. I wouldn't say no to a cup of hot chocolate and a plate of your peanut butter and chocolate chunk biscuits for afters though." Creature, who'd been looking positively murderous the moment Harry had mentioned the leftovers, and making Naruto think he might attack, grew happy the moment Harry had mentioned the hot chocolate and the biscuits before he disappeared with a pop, taking both the basket from Naruto's arms and the trunk that had been sitting beside Harry. "This way, Naruto, if I know Creature, he'll already have everything set up in the dining room for us," Harry instructed as he headed down the hallway that ran beside a set of stairs leading upstairs. "While we're staying here, there are a few very important rules that I need for you to follow so that you don't end up hurt. First rule, do not wander off on your own to explore the house. While Creature has been diligently working to remove the dark artifacts that the previous owners collected, there are still quite a few of them left behind and they are all dangerous. I will give you a proper tour of the place tomorrow and show you those rooms that are safe for you to use. Second rule, please don't wander off outside alone. It is easy to get lost in London and there are a lot of unpleasant people that roam the streets no matter what the time of day. The backyard is unsafe at the moment, but I'll start cleaning it up soon so that you'll have a place to run around outside when you get tired of being cooped up in the house. Right now though, there's just no telling what kind of wretched things have taken seat out there or what kind of dangerous critters moved in while the house was neglected. Third rule, the kitchen is off limits. The kitchen is Creature's domain and he can get right grumpy when anyone invades his space and tries to steal what he sees as his work. If you get hungry between meals, you can just ask Creature to make you anything within reason and he'll usually be happy to serve you. Creature will also sneak into your room to clean it for you, so if you leave something out and can't find it, check where you normally keep it as he probably put it away for you while you were out of the room. It's also no use asking him to stop because he's too old to change his ways. They'd reached the dining room by this time where they found the table already set and several piping hot dishes sitting where they would be well within reach of both place settings. Harry trailed off as he took a moment to pull out a tiny bag that he made grow before he dug into the bag and pulled out a child carrier that he made grow next. The teen then tucked the still sleeping Teddy into the carrier and set it on the table before taking the seat at the head table, leaving Naruto to take the one just to the left of his cousin's chair where a plate and silverware were already waiting for him. Go ahead and take a seat and help yourself to anything you see on the table, Harry urged as he smiled at Naruto even as he began filling his plate with an assortment of unfamiliar dishes. There is no need to stand on ceremony. The only sound that filled the room for the next few minutes was the sound of silverware and utensils clinking against the serving platters and the plates. Naruto taking a little of those dishes, those that Dudley had given him to try and those that looked like they would taste alright, while avoiding those that didn't. After a few minutes, Harry broke the silence once more as he asked, let's see, which rule did I leave off on? Oh no, the one about the kitchen being off limits and how the scary little man will pick up my things if I leave them out. Oh, right, that just leaves us with the last rule, which also happens to be the most important rule, Harry stated as he set his silverware down and pinned Naruto with intense green eyes. It is very important that you don't hesitate to speak up if there's something bothering you or if you don't understand something. I know exactly what it is like to be thrust into a whole new world and not know up from down. Dealing with trying to understand an entirely new culture is never easy, and I am more than willing to answer any questions you have or get you whatever you need to make your stay here as comfortable as possible for you. I'd also appreciate it if you never lied to me. If you don't want to talk about something, fine, I won't force you, but please don't lie to me, alright? Naruto could only nod in agreement as he stared at Harry with wide blue eyes. He still wasn't really used to people being willing to help him, and while Naoki had said much the same thing, Naruto knew that it had been Naoki's job to help everyone that passed through the portals. Harry was under no such obligations, and that made a world of difference to the 8.5-year-old. Perfect. Now, I've noticed that you've not eaten anything yet. Is that because you aren't hungry or because you aren't certain what everything is? I know what a few things are. Dudley had me try a bunch of things, but there are only a couple of those here and the rest of them look kind of weird. The rest of the meal was spent with Harry describing each of the dishes for Naruto, patiently listing the ingredients and spices that were used in each one, as well as offering suggestions of what could be added to the dish to improve the taste if it wasn't to his liking. Naruto in turn asked Harry what kind of ramen he liked, only to discover that Harry had never tried any Japanese dishes, let alone tasted the food of the gods. The blonde swore right then and there to introduce his poor cousin to the wonder that was ramen at the first opportunity available. Halfway through the meal, Teddy finally woke up and Naruto had a brief glimpse of dark amber before the baby's eyes turned deep green to match Harry's eyes, and his hair changed from bright blue to coal black. Knowing the kid could change his appearance and seeing him do it were two different things, and Naruto couldn't help but exclaim how cool it was, his loud voice startling the kid and causing his eyes, hair, and skin to turn bright white in shock as he whipped around to stare at Naruto, his little lower lip trembling. Naruto apologized for scaring the kid, but Harry waved him off and quickly distracted the little boy by offering him food, and his hair and eyes soon mimicked Harry's features once more while his skin returned to a normal healthy pink. Once they'd eaten their fill of the food that they'd been given by the older redhead, Naruto uncertain of her name since he'd not been introduced to anyone because of the screeching redhead whose name was Jenny or something like that, creature appeared and cleared the table with a snap of his fingers, while a second snap made a steaming pitcher that smelled of warm chocolate, a tray that held several tasty things, such as a bag of marshmallows, a large cup of chocolate shavings, a shaker of cinnamon, and a bowl of whipped cream, and several plates piled high with different kinds of still warm cookies appear. Naruto sniffed the air appreciatively as the scent of warm peanut butter, sugar, and chocolate filled the room and made his mouth water. Is there anything else Master Harry requires? No, I don't think so, though I just realized that I didn't properly introduce you to my cousin, Harry stated as he grabbed one of the pale ivory cookies, what Naruto would later learn were shortbread cookies, though Harry called them biscuits, and handed it to little Teddy. Creature, this young man is Naruto Evans. He's my second or third cousin from my mother's side of the family, and he'll be staying with us for the time being. Please treat him as part of the family. I've already warned him that the kitchen is off limits. Does young Master Evans require anything from Creature? No thank you, Creature-san, Naruto automatically replied as he distractedly watched Harry pouring out 2 mugs of dark chocolate and set one of them in front of Naruto, while he began adding different items to the other cup from the tray Creature had brought. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, Naruto, such as your age and birth date, the names of your parents, how long ago you lost your parents, a few things you like or don't like, and why the man that took you to the Dursleys pretty much abandoned you. And if you tell me what Dudley has already told you about me, then I will fill you in on the important things he might have left out. I was born on October 10th and I'm going to be 9 this year. My parents' names were Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato. They both died the day I was born when our village was attacked. Ito. I really like ramen, Izumi-chan's cooking, Sudoku puzzles, flying, and training. I don't like mean people or uncooked vegetables, Naruto began hesitantly, carefully censoring his words because he wasn't sure yet whether or not he wanted to tell Harry about the elemental countries, though he was thinking he might tell him later because of the things he'd seen Harry do. Ah no. Dudley told me that Lily-san died when you were just a baby. He said you'd been stuffed in the closet that Petunia locked me in. He told me that you can do all kinds of cool tricks but that Petunia didn't like that you could do them. And he also told me that I had a bunch of stuff in common with you. He talked about you a lot but mostly just to tell me how much I would like you once I met you because you were a good person. Wow, when I was your age I never thought I'd ever hear Dudley say nice things about me. Harry mused as he took a bite out of a golden brown cookie with thick chunks of chocolate and peanuts in it. He then pinned the 8-year-old with those piercing green eyes again as he casually asked, "Is there any particular reason why you don't want to talk about the guy that vanished and left you all alone in a hostile environment after he turned up with you at number 4? If nothing else, I need to know the Burke's name, so I know who I will be chewing out for endangering your life." There wasn't anyone else, Naruto blurted out after he spent a couple of minutes squirming beneath those green eyes that demanded the truth. "I came to England alone." "Then who was the man that turned up at number 4 with you?" "That was me. I made him look like an adult. He was just a Kage Bunshin and he wasn't real. Petunia destroyed him when she hit him." Harry tilted his head to one side like a curious bird as his brow furrowed slightly in puzzlement before he asked, "Can you make another one?" Naruto nodded reluctantly as he hoped he wouldn't be in trouble with Naoki for revealing that ability to his cousin. "Will you show me?" Naruto bit his lip in uncertainty before he recalled the cool things he'd seen his cousin do earlier and he brought his hands up to form the seal he needed to create a shadow clone. Due to having gone several days without burning off his excess chakra with training and chakra control exercises and because he was nervous, he accidentally made a few too many and the room was soon packed with at least 50 copies of the blonde. Naruto cringed as he watched Harry's eyes widen in shock only to be shocked in turn as his cousin began acting like a little kid as he got up and began poking and prodding the clones closest to him as he inspected him. The teen even tickled one of them, making the clone laugh so hard it popped in a puff of smoke that made Harry jump. "Amazing," Harry exclaimed as he spun around a few times to take in all of the clones. "And you can change what they look like." In response, the clones each used a henge to turn into different people and animals, a couple of them even cheekily turning into Teddy, Harry, and Creature, though those 3 disguises weren't exactly perfect because he didn't know them that well. "Bloody hell, I've never seen anything so fascinating before and I've seen some amazing things since my 11th birthday. I would have given almost anything to have an ability like that when I was younger." The clones dispelled with puffs of smoke in small groups a moment later since there was really no reason for them to stay. Harry grinned like a loon for a moment longer before he suddenly started frowning as his eyes fell on Naruto again and he dropped down into his chair and tapped his fingers on the table as if he was annoyed or frustrated. "Why were you alone? Did you run away from your guardians? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Harry finally asked as he sat up and glanced up to study Naruto with concern. "Did you come all the way to England from Japan just to look for the Dursleys?" I never had anyone to take care of me. I lived alone until I left the village where I was born and made my way to Japan to look for my uncle. Naoki Gigi found me almost as soon as I got to Japan and helped me look for him while I went to school to catch up on some of the stuff I missed. Naoki didn't want me to fly to England alone after he found Petunia, but I thought I would be fine because she was supposed to be, and all I wanted was to find family. Harry finished heavily as the 19-year-old suddenly looked far older. "May Merlin, Maeve, and Mungo give me strength in the face of adversity. Aside from the Nahoki gentleman you've mentioned a couple of times, does anyone else know that you are here in England and that you came to see the Dursleys? All of my sensei from Asahikawa knew I was coming here. Chikushu, I forgot. I was supposed to call Naoki and let him know I got here all right, but I was so nervous about meeting Petunia and then you were a little preoccupied with the trouble you landed yourself in. There is no phone in this house and I couldn't tell you where the closest public phone around here is." "Ah, I know. Why don't you write out a letter to your friend and I will have Creature send it out tonight with the fastest possible courier and I'll see what I can do about securing a way for you to call your friend any time you want, within reason, while you are staying with me." Okay, Naruto agreed as he pulled his backpack off for the first time in days and dug into it for a pencil and a piece of paper, from his travel supplies. He then spent a good 20 minutes writing out a letter, making certain to apologize several times for not calling or writing sooner and to leave out the death threats that Petunia and Vernon had given to him. He then glanced up to ask Harry for the address of the house they were staying at so he could give it to Naoki when he noticed his cousin had just finished writing a letter of his own, using a feather of all things. Ah no. Was there something you needed, Naruto? Harry asked as he glanced up to meet Naruto's gaze as he carefully waved the thick paper he'd written his letter on back and forth, to dry the ink. What's that? Naruto inquired nervously as he eyed the letter as if it was a dangerous snake, completely forgetting about asking for an address in the wake of his renewed trepidation. I took the opportunity to write a letter of introduction for myself to send along with your letter. I would not want any of your friends to think that I was trying to take advantage of you. I also provided them with a couple of different ways that they can contact me, and you, since I do not have a telephone. Are you finished with your letter? Yeah. Please pass it here then and I will seal it into the envelope with mine and you can write the address on the front. Can I read? Naruto asked as he continued to stare at the letter that had been neatly folded into thirds and tucked into the thick envelope that Naruto hadn't noticed earlier. The proper way to ask someone for permission to do something would be to use the word may. Harry automatically corrected courtesy of Hermione's many lectures on using proper grammar through the years. While may and can both have similar meanings, the word can usually refers to a person's capabilities rather than a request for permission. So when you ask, "Can I read your letter?" it implies that you are asking if you are capable of reading instead of requesting for permission to read the letter. And to answer your question, yes, you may read the letter I wrote. Arigato, Naruto murmured softly as he accepted the letter that Harry passed to him, unsure whether he was thanking his cousin for the impromptu lesson, which had been helpful and easy to understand, or for permission to read the letter he'd written. You're welcome, Squirt. Naruto smiled at his cousin when he heard the warmth in his tone as he slid the letter out of the envelope so that he could read what his cousin had written. He wrinkled his nose when he realized that Harry's handwriting was nearly as hard to read as some of his own earlier attempts at writing Romaji and English. He soon ignored the sloppy penmanship as he focused on the words instead. To whom it may concern, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Sir Harry James Potter, a knight of Her Majesty's Realm, Order of Merlin, First Class, Head of House Potter, and Regent for House Black on behalf of my godson, Theodore Remus Lupin. I am also the biological son of James Charles Potter and Lily Potter, née Evans. I am contacting you due to the connection you purportedly have with my newly discovered cousin, Naruto Evans. I am sad to say that my maternal aunt was less than cordial in receiving my cousin upon his arrival here in England due to a rare mental illness that has progressively grown worse through the years. Thankfully, our oldest cousin, Dudley Dursley, was able to intervene on Naruto's behalf and he did not suffer any physical harm at the hands of my aunt. Unfortunately, I am fairly positive that Naruto was verbally abused during the short time he was left in my aunt's care, though the full extent of said abuse is currently unknown as Naruto has only been in my care for a few short hours as I write this letter. I will see to it that any issues that come up as a result of said abuse are addressed appropriately as they appear. I strongly urge you to avoid any and all contact with Petunia Dursley, née Evans, or her husband, Vernon Dursley, for any reason as her mental health has rapidly deteriorated since Naruto's arrival and her condition is expected to degenerate further in the near future. In light of the seriousness of my aunt's declining health, please list me as the primary contact for all matters dealing with the Potter, Black, Evans, and Dursley families. My contact information is as follows. Sir Harry James Potter, care of Phoenix Transports, number 27 Gryffindor LN, Godric's Hollow, Devon, England, or Black Family Regent, care of Hawking International Services, number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England, or Harry Potter, care of Night Bird Ltd, Gringotts Bank, Diagon Alley, London, England. In the event of an emergency where time is of the utmost importance, please contact your local government office and provide them with my full name, including all of my titles, along with a brief description of the emergency, and they should have the means to get a message to me within 20 minutes or less, depending on my current location at the time of contact. You may also list Dudley Dursley as a secondary contact. However, Dudley is currently in the process of moving his primary residence and will be temporarily unavailable. Once Dudley's move has been finalized, I will forward you his contact information so that you will have it for your records. Additionally, I wanted to assure you that I intend to take responsibility for my cousin's needs for as long as he wishes to remain here in England. As such, I am fully prepared to provide due compensation for any financial debts that you incurred while my cousin was in your care. If, after reading this letter and Naruto's accompanying letter, you still feel uncomfortable with the situation, I am more than willing to make arrangements so that we might meet face to face either here in England or in Japan in order to discuss the matter. Plans are being made to secure access to a telephone so that Naruto may contact you whenever he wishes. Sincerely yours, Sir Harry James Potter. Naruto frequently had to ask Harry what some of the words meant as he'd not come across them during his lessons, and by the time he finished reading the letter he had 101 questions he wanted to ask, but they were all so jumbled up in his mind that he couldn't actually voice any of them out loud. He was also completely confused as to why his cousin, who'd not even known him a full day, was willing to go to the lengths he'd said he would, both in the letter and more than once directly to Naruto since they'd met. Then there was the absolute terror. Naruto felt that none of what had happened that evening was real, that he'd wake up in the morning and find that he was still trapped in the closet. Eventually, Naruto managed to ask one question that was more like 30 questions all rolled into one. Why? Harry stood up from the table, made his way to Naruto's side, and placed a hand on the blonde's head before he answered Naruto's loaded question with, "Because we're family." Chapter 7, Harry's Story. Saturday, August 7, 1999, early morning. Elemental District, Asahikawa, Hokkaido, Japan. Sasaki Naoki woke up an hour earlier than usual and got ready to leave. The 43-year-old man fully determined to catch a flight to Haneda Airport that morning before catching the first available flight to England so that he could find out what had happened to little Uzumaki Naruto. He knew he never should have allowed the child to head off alone to England, but he'd let Naruto talk him out of providing the 8-year-old with an escort. And while he knew that Naruto could take care of himself, up to a point, Naruto was still just a child, despite the fact that the blonde did his best to make other people forget that little tidbit. When Naruto hadn't called him the moment he arrived in London as promised, Naoki had at first chalked it up to the kid being too overwhelmed or overexcited to remember his promise. It had now been over a week though, and Naoki feared that something bad had happened to the kid that had quickly wormed his way into his heart during the months he'd lived with his family. So he'd spent the last 2 days making arrangements and applying for an emergency travel visa so that he could travel to England in order to find out what had happened to Naruto. Naoki collected his hastily packed suitcase, packed the evening before when he'd received notice that his emergency travel visa had been approved, and headed out the door. 10 minutes later. He never made it past his front porch though, as his attention had been caught by an out-of-place ivory-colored envelope sitting in the middle of the porch the moment he'd stepped outside. He stared at the envelope in confusion for a full minute, wondering why and how the envelope had ended up on his porch of all places, before he reached down to pick it up so he could get a closer look at it. The moment he recognized Naruto's handwriting on the front of the envelope, he felt a combination of relief and exasperation wash through him, as he was now holding proof in his hands that the kid was alright. The exasperation was due to the fact that Naruto had chosen the slowest method possible to contact him instead of just calling him from the nearest phone. No longer feeling an urgent need to rush off to the airport, Naoki re-entered his home and headed for the kitchen to make a cup of tea and read Naruto's letter. He could still catch a flight to England after he saw what Naruto had to say if he wasn't satisfied with the kid's assessment of the situation. 8 minutes later, Naoki was seated at the table with a steaming mug of tea. He used a pair of scissors to cut off a small piece on one side of the rather expensive envelope and shook out the 2 pieces of paper that had been inside. He frowned a bit over the difference in quality of the 2 papers and opened them both up to find only one of them had been written by the 8-year-old. Naoki wasn't certain whether or not he should be relieved to know that Naruto wasn't alone, as he didn't recognize the name signed at the bottom of the letter that had been written on the more expensive paper. Naoki considered the 2 letters for a moment before he reached for Naruto's letter first. He wanted to see what the gaki had to say for himself before he read the other letter. Naoki, I am so sorry, I completely forgot about calling you like I promised, and Harry doesn't have a phone, or I would have called you the moment I remembered. Harry said he'd find a way for me to call you soon, and in the meantime he told me to write you a letter to let you know that I was okay. I am really sorry for not calling. Petunia and Vernon weren't really happy about meeting me, but Dudley was really nice to me. Dudley was the one that asked Harry to come get me. Dudley also told me that cousin Lily didn't die when you thought she did, but she did die when Dudley and Harry were just babies, and that Harry came to live with Dudley's parents after his mother died. Harry looks nothing at all like a Namikaze, he has black hair and dark green eyes. He told me that he looks just like his father. Harry is so cool. He did this awesome jutsu that made all of Dudley's things pack themselves into the boxes, and he took me on this awesome bus. That was just like those fun park rides you told me about. It was so fun. His girlfriend isn't all that nice, but Harry got all mad at her for the things she said, and now she's not his girlfriend anymore. I feel bad because it's my fault, but Harry said it was both his fault and her fault. Harry even said I saved him, but I didn't quite get what it was I saved him from. Harry has a baby. Teddy is Harry's godson, and he is so cute. And he has this awesome Kekii Genkai that lets him change what he looks like. It's almost like the Henge no Jutsu, but he doesn't have to make any hand seals, and he can't control what he looks like right now though, because he's just a baby. Harry said Teddy's mother could do the same thing. I scared him on accident the first time I saw him change, and he turned all white. I'm going to stay with Harry. He said I could stay with him for as long as I wanted. I like him, even if he is really scary when he gets angry. He only yells when gets a little upset, like when he yelled at Petunia when he came to get me, but he got all quiet and cold like ice when he got really angry with his old girlfriend. Harry is really nice to me though. I can't wait to see what other jutsu Harry can do and ride the ugly purple bus again. I also have to take Harry to have some ramen. Can you believe that he's never tried ramen before? He didn't even know what ramen was when I asked him if he liked it. My poor Itoko, I get nightmares just thinking about how terrible it would be to never have any ramen at all. I wish I could bring him to the elemental district so that he could taste Izumi's salt ramen. I did find one restaurant here that serves ramen, and the beef ramen I had was alright, but nowhere near as good as Izumi's homemade ramen. I'd make him some myself, but the kitchen is off limits because the little man that works in there doesn't like it when people do his job. Maybe I can teach him how to make it for me. I'll try to call you soon, and I'm really sorry again about not calling you sooner. Naruto. Naoki snorted over Naruto's comments and reaction to this hairy person's unfamiliarity with ramen. Less amusing were the glaring omissions over what had happened when Naruto had first met Petunia and her husband, and the reason why Petunia's son had felt the need to call someone else to come pick up Naruto. He also wasn't certain what to make of Naruto's claim that Lily Evans had lived long enough to give birth to a child. Naoki set Naruto's letter aside for his wife and the others to read later while he picked up the other letter that had been sent with the 8-year-olds. To whom it may concern, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Sir Harry James Potter, a knight of Her Majesty's Realm, Order of Merlin, First Class, Head of House Potter, and Regent for House Black on behalf of my godson, Theodore Remus Lupin. I am also the biological son of James Charles Potter and Lily Potter, née Evans. I am contacting you due to the connection you purportedly have with my newly discovered cousin, Naruto Evans. I am sad to say that my maternal aunt was less than cordial in receiving my cousin upon his arrival here in England due to a rare mental illness that has progressively grown worse through the years. Thankfully, our oldest cousin, Dudley Desley, was able to intervene on Naruto's behalf, and he did not suffer any physical harm at the hands of my aunt. Unfortunately, I am fairly positive that Naruto was verbally abused during the short time he was left in my aunt's care, though the full extent of said abuse is currently unknown, as Naruto has only been in my care for a few short hours as I write this letter. I will see to it that any issues that come up as a result of said abuse are addressed appropriately as they appear. I strongly urge you to avoid any and all contact with Petunia Desley, née Evans, or her husband, Vernon Desley, for any reason, as her mental health has rapidly deteriorated since Naruto's arrival, and her condition is expected to degenerate further in the near future. In light of the seriousness of my aunt's declining health, please list me as the primary contact for all matters dealing with the Potter, Black, Evans, and Desley families. My contact information is as follows. Sir Harry James Potter, care of Phoenix Transports, number 27 Gryffindor LN, Godric's Hollow, Devon, England, or Black Family Regent, care of Hawking International Services, number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England, or Harry Potter, care of Night Bird Ltd., Gringotts Bank, Diagon Alley, London, England. In the event of an emergency where time is of the utmost importance, please contact your local government office and provide them with my full name, including all of my titles, along with a brief description of the emergency, and they should have the means to get a message to me within 20 minutes or less, depending on my current location at the time of contact. You may also list Dudley Desley as a secondary contact. However, Dudley is currently in the process of moving his primary residence and will be temporarily unavailable. Once Dudley's move has been finalized, I will forward you his contact information so that you will have it for your records. Additionally, I wanted to assure you that I intend to take responsibility for my cousin's needs for as long as he wishes to remain here in England. As such, I am fully prepared to provide due compensation for any financial debts that you incurred while my cousin was in your care. If, after reading this letter and Naruto's accompanying letter, you still feel uncomfortable with the situation, I am more than willing to make arrangements so that we might meet face to face either here in England or in Japan in order to discuss the matter. Plans are being made to secure access to a telephone so that Naruto may contact you whenever he wishes. Sincerely yours, Sir Harry James Potter. P.S. I cannot find the words to express just how angry and disappointed I am that an adult would allow a young child to travel alone halfway around the world to meet perfect strangers. I did not mention this earlier in the letter, as I fully expected Naruto to ask for permission to read what I wrote above, and he did, but I need for you to know exactly how serious of a situation my cousin ended up in due to your decision. My aunt and uncle are not kind people. They are, in fact, the worst kind of people you can imagine, as they have two faces, the nice and friendly one they show to the public and the terrible ugly one that is their real face. They are also highly bigoted people that are not above punishing a child simply because said child existed. The mental illness my aunt suffers from. It's an irrational hate of anything and everything different. My uncle is also known for having an extremely short temper and for resorting to physical violence when he is angry. If not for Dudley's quick thinking in contacting me, there is no telling just what would have happened to Naruto. That said, the worst did not happen. Dudley smuggled Naruto out of his temporary prison, and protected him until I could collect him. Though the fact that Dudley was still living with his parents and that he had been present the day Naruto turned up on their doorstep, was nothing short of a miracle. I hope Naruto at least came clean with you about what happened the day he met Petunia, but I get the impression that he isn't the type of kid to trust adults or worry those people he likes with his troubles. I can see it in his eyes. I suppose he's a lot like me in that sense. I was actually shocked to learn just how much Naruto and I have in common, and we haven't really had time to get to know one another yet or hear each other's complete stories. Naruto does seem quite fond of you though, and it is only my desire to take his feelings into consideration that prevents me from showing you just how displeased I was to learn that you allowed him to travel alone. It helps that Naruto was unharmed despite the seriousness of the situation he ended up in. I will, for now, give you the benefit of the doubt and reserve judgment until I've met you and heard your side of the story and the rest of Naruto's story. HJP. Naoki felt more than a little sick to his stomach after reading the postscript Mr. Potter had placed at the end of his letter, as the guilt and worry he'd felt prior to finding the two letters on his doorstep slammed back into him threefold. He then immediately grabbed up both letters and headed to his office in order to search for more information on the mysterious relative of Naruto's that conveniently popped up out of the woodwork just in time to supposedly save Naruto. Another cousin that had purportedly lived with the Dursleys according to Naruto's letter, despite there having been no mention of another child ever living in the Dursley household according to the research he'd done on the family. Sunday, August 8, 1999, early morning, pre-dawn hours. Number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England. Harry groggily rolled out of bed, pulled on his dressing gown, and wearily headed towards the nursery to take care of his godson. He'd taken 2 steps towards Teddy's room before he paused in confusion when he realized that the sound of crying that had woken him up just now was not coming from the nursery, as expected, but from Naruto's bedroom. That realization helped clear the last of the sleep from Harry's mind, and he hesitated for a brief moment before he strode over to Naruto's door and lightly rapped his knuckles on the door, to announce his presence, before he opened the door. It only took him a few seconds to locate Naruto huddled on his bed in the corner where the bed butted up against the wall. "Hey, Squirt," Harry greeted softly as he stepped into the room and slowly made his way across the room. "Are you feeling alright?" "I'm fine, Dadabayo," Naruto loudly proclaimed with forced cheerfulness as he plastered a fake grin across his face, the moonlight trickling in through the curtains reflecting off of the tear tracks staining his whisker-marked face, silently giving away the lie in his words. Harry sighed at Naruto's attempt to pretend there was nothing wrong as he seated himself at the foot of the bed. The kid's response reminded the wizard of himself yet again. He knew something was bothering his little cousin, he just didn't know exactly what it was. The sweat-soaked pillow and tangled mess that had been made of the covers suggested that it had been a nightmare that was the problem. Something that wasn't unexpected given the kid's recent experiences while in Petunia and Vernon's care. "I can see why Hermione still gets so cross with me most of the time when I tell her I'm just fine," Harry quipped with a soft chuckle once he'd finished his brief analysis of the situation. "When we were younger, she always used to worry even more if I told her I was just fine when she knew there was something bothering me. Over time, she started getting annoyed instead of growing worried because she got tired of me trying to hide the things that bothered me in order to stop her from worrying about me. That was especially true on those nights when she found me after I'd had yet another nightmare." "Did you have lots of nightmares when you were little?" Naruto asked hesitantly when Harry trailed off. "A few every now and then, just like any other kid," Harry replied with a nod as he glanced up at Naruto before he turned to stare out the window. "That all changed after I turned 13, when I came face to face with a vile creature called a Dementor that feeds off the misery of others, forcing their victims to relive their worst memories while they devour the victim's soul piece by piece with each breath they take. The darker and more painful a person's memories are, the more appetizing that person's soul and life force are to the Dementors. They flock to me like flies to honey. The memories they stirred never really faded after that, and the dangerous situations I ended up in time and time again through the next several years only fueled even darker nightmares." How did you get rid of the nightmares?" Naruto inquired as he leaned towards Harry with a rather hopeful expression on his face. Harry smiled sadly as he climbed to his feet, flipped over Naruto's pillow, and straightened up the covers before holding them up to encourage Naruto to crawl back under them as he replied, "I didn't. I still have them most every night. I did, however, learn how to make a few of them far less frightening." "How?" "I stopped trying to hide my nightmares and started talking about them with my two best friends. Talking about some of the terrible memories that gave birth to the nightmares helped even more since they were what was really bothering me. I am not going to force you to talk about your bad dreams, and I can't make you tell me who or what it was that forced you to flee the only home you'd ever known to hunt down a relative you'd never met, but I want you to know that I am here if you ever do want to talk about those things." Nothing more was said as Harry tucked Naruto back into bed and ruffled the kid's head before he exited the room. Harry then checked on Teddy before he returned to his room. As he crawled back into bed, Harry felt a sense of unease filling him as his mind lingered on just how similar his and Naruto's lives seemed to be. They were both orphans, they both had trouble trusting adults, they both suffered from nightmares, and they both tended to hide their true feelings from the rest of the world. What really bothered Harry though, was the fear that Naruto had been marked by prophecy in the same way that Harry had been marked by a prophecy, from the moment of his birth. After all, the whisker marks on Naruto's face stood out just as glaringly obvious as the lightning bolt scar that still stood upon his own brow, faded though it was. Friday, August 13, 1999, late afternoon. Number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England. Harry saw Hermione through the floor before he dropped down onto the couch with a soft sigh of contentment as he propped his feet up on the coffee table and slouched down, until he was comfortably sprawled between the two pieces of furniture. It had been a busy week and the 19-year-old wizard couldn't help but wonder how Mr. and Mrs. Weasley managed to raise 7 kids when Harry had trouble enough just keeping up with 2. Then again, Harry had also never been happier than he had been as the three of them explored the more interesting parts of London together. Monday had been spent wandering around the London Zoo for close to 15 hours. Tuesday had found the trio visiting the Tower of London. On Wednesday, Harry had taken the boys to the London Aquarium, which had opened 2 years earlier. And Thursday had seen the trio visiting the National Maritime Museum and the Cutty Sark Museum ship. Needing a break from the overcrowded tourist hotspots, Harry had called Hermione the night before and asked her if she'd come over to watch Teddy for a few hours. Harry had then taken Naruto to watch the newly released animated film Fairies at the cinema, during the theater's slowest hours, and eat a late lunch at one of the city's Japanese restaurants where Harry got his first taste of ramen. Harry had found the soup to be a bit too salty for his tastes, but it wasn't terrible, and while he doubted that it would ever become one of his favorite dishes, he wouldn't be opposed to having a bowl every now and then, something that had pleased Naruto. Harry had chosen that particular film to gauge Naruto's reaction to the concept of magic and magical creatures, as he'd been having a hard time determining whether or not Naruto was aware of the wizarding world. His cousin hadn't shown any reaction to verbal references to magic, a few examples including the words witch, squib, dementor, and house elf, and while Naruto appeared amazed any time Harry performed a spell, he showed no surprise over the fact that Harry was doing magic. Then there was the way Naruto had immediately jumped to the conclusion that there were wards surrounding the house that first night. Yet his cousin had shown no reaction to Harry's full name when he'd read Harry's letter, and he knew for a fact that the Japanese wizarding community was well aware of exactly who he was. His story was known worldwide, and he had been required to attend an emergency meeting of the International Confederation of Wizards shortly after he'd defeated Voldemort. Naruto had also claimed to love flying but had not once asked Harry to take him for a ride on his broom, and he knew the kid had seen his firebolt more than once since he'd arrived. So, Harry had decided to give his cousin a test of sorts in the form of the animated movie, knowing that a child raised in the magical world would wonder why Muggles had been allowed to make a movie about magical creatures, and a Muggle child was more likely to ask if the magical creatures seen in the movie were real. The movie would also provide a nice opening for Harry to bring up the subject of magic on the off chance that Naruto did not ask either one of the expected questions. It was a conversation that Harry knew he needed to have with his cousin, because he needed to make certain that Naruto was fully aware of the magical world before he eventually took the kid to Diagon Alley for the first time. Harry was slowly starting to drift off to sleep in the middle of his plotting and planning when he was jolted back into wakefulness by the sound of his cousin calling his name. "Harry, what did you need, Squirt?" No, may I ask you a question?" "You are welcome to ask as many questions as you want. Is creature one of those hobgoblin things like Broom from the movie?" Harry arched an eyebrow in surprise. That was not exactly one of the questions he'd been expecting, but he supposed he should have considered the possibility that the kid would see the similarities between creature and the hobgoblin from the movie, in behavior and duty if not in looks. He then smiled proudly at his cousin before he drawled, "No, he's not." "Oh," Naruto replied, half in confusion and half in disappointment. "House elves are closely related to hobgoblins though," Harry added with a slight smirk as he saw Naruto start, his blue eyes growing wider. "Creature is what most people would call a brownie. Did you just try to prank me, Itoko?" Naruto demanded as his eyes narrowed slightly. "Can you fault a bloke for trying when pranking runs in his blood?" Naruto tilted his head to one side as open surprise and excitement painted his face as he asked, "Really? Truly, my father was the unofficial leader of a group of legendary pranksters, my godfather was the group's second in command and their number one idea man, and my godson is the son of the man that was the group's main researcher and strategist. I'm also the financial backer for one of the wizarding world's newest joke shops, which sells all of the latest pranking innovations, and the sole owner of the oldest joke shop still in business in the wizarding world, best known for supplying classical pranks to magical children everywhere." "What kinds of pranks have you done?" "Well, there was that time I threw fireworks in my rival's potion and made it explode during class." Harry mused as Naruto perched himself on the edge of the coffee table right beside Harry's feet. "Then there was the time I pretended to be a ghost and tricked the school's poltergeist into letting me and my friends escape instead of turning us in for breaking the rules. Oh, and I can't forget the time I tricked this real jerk into freeing his house elf in order to save the elf from the abuse the man's family heaped on him. That one was a classic. My best prank ever didn't get many laughs though." "What did you do?" Naruto asked curiously as he leaned closer. "I played dead to trick a terrible man that was more monster than man, and at the same time hurt my friends and those that I considered my family. I had to make the man believe he'd won though." A stricken look appeared on Naruto's face as he flinched back and hoarsely demanded, "Why?" "The answer to that is a very long and very dark story," Harry solemnly stated as he pulled his feet from the coffee table and sat up straight. "It is also a very sad story filled with pain and death." "Are you certain you want to hear it?" "Yes," Naruto answered firmly after thinking about it for a split second. "All right. Our story starts with a desperate young witch from a once great family that had fallen on hard times due to the poor decisions a number of her ancestors had made. This young witch was not pretty, had very little magic, and while she was not stupid, she was not very smart. She was also very, very poor and had no hopes of ever achieving her dreams because her father was a bitter old man that belittled her for those things that she lacked. Her name was Mary Gaunt and her dream was to marry the handsome young man she'd fallen desperately in love with the moment she saw him. Tom Riddle was the handsome and privileged son of Thomas and Mary Riddle and everything that Marvolo Gaunt, Mary father, hated. He was rich, rude, and worst of all he was a muggle. When Marvolo learned that his daughter had fallen in love with the Riddle's only son, he was furious with her and ordered her to stay away from him. Mary refused to listen to her father though. She was in love and that was all that mattered in her mind. Harry closely watched Naruto's face as he continued to speak of how Mary used a love potion to make Tom Riddle fall in love with her and how Riddle had subsequently left her when she stopped feeding him the love potion at one point, abandoning a pregnant Mary who would later die giving birth to Riddle's son. Harry then spoke of how Tom Marvolo Riddle, Mary's son, grew up in an orphanage where he was often bullied by the older boys, discovered his ability to use magic, nurtured his hatred for those he lived with, and used his magic to get revenge and bully those that had once bullied him. After that, he spoke of Tom's years at Hogwarts and the series of murders he'd eventually commit in his quest for revenge and power, taking care to gloss over the darker details. The 19-year-old savior didn't fail to notice the troubled look of understanding and guilt that had crossed Naruto's face during that part of the story. Harry knew part of it was because Naruto was an orphan, just like Tom and Harry, but feared the rest was because Naruto knew what it was like to be bullied and had at one point wished to get revenge on those that had hurt him, much like Harry had at one point. The wizard was also certain that Naruto would never follow Tom's dark path due to the way the child had reacted to the choices Tom had made, making Naruto more like Harry and less like Tom. Not long after that, Harry reached the point in the story where his own history began, though he purposefully left his and his parents' names out of the story because he wanted Naruto to focus on the overall story for now and not on his own personal history. And so Harry spoke of the Marauders, Snape, his mother, and the growing war. Of his mother's and Snape's friendship and their falling out, of the Marauders' borderline bullying, and of the mistakes people make and the lines that they cross when they are angry. Harry took a short break after that to take care of Teddy and to give Naruto time to absorb everything he'd learned up to that point while the three of them ate steak and kidney pie for supper. He picked up where he'd left off over dessert as they ate treacle tart and vanilla ice cream while Teddy played on the floor with an animated stuffed wolf between bites of ice cream. This time he covered the history of the Order of the Phoenix, which included a brief history of Albus Dumbledore, the battles his parents and the other Marauders had fought in the escalating war, and the spy in their midst. From there he spoke of the prophecy that had been given, the enemy that had overheard half of the prophecy, the destruction of his own family, again leaving out names, and the Dark Lord's first fall. He then spoke of how the wizarding world celebrated the defeat of the Dark Lord, how the baby was hailed a hero just because he'd not died, and of the chaos that followed as the wizarding world slowly recovered from the terrible war. The wizard then spoke of the child hero's cold and lonely childhood, still leaving out many details and names, as he supervised Naruto and Teddy's bath. He took care to point out how similar the baby savior's childhood mirrored the Dark Lord's childhood in many ways before pointing out the biggest difference that set both hero and villain apart, their choice in how they reacted to the hate that had been directed at them by those that had been meant to take care of them and the children they interacted with. Harry and Naruto then tucked a yellow-haired and green-eyed Teddy into bed before they retreated back downstairs to finish the story. Harry got lost in his memories as he spoke of his first 3 years at Hogwarts, of the friends he'd made, the adventures he'd inevitably got mixed up in each year, and of the wonders and horrors he discovered along the way. He grew tense as he covered his 4th, 5th, and 6th years, each of those years marked by a death that had affected Harry deeply. His voice fairly shook when he reached what should have been his 7th year at Hogwarts. The pain and grief he felt for those that had been lost during that terrible year still as fresh as it had been well over a year ago. The death of the Dark Lord Voldemort marked the end of the war, though it will take years before the scars the war left on the wizarding world heal and fade. Even today, people fear to speak the Dark Lord's name for fear that it will bring him back once more. Harry finished tiredly before he sipped at the mug of thick hot chocolate that creature had silently delivered to him at some point towards the end of the story, the silky smoothness of the rich chocolate soothing his sore throat even as it banished the terrible memories that had been stirred during the course of the story. "Ah no, who is the boy who lived? Why didn't you tell me his name? Do you know his name? What happened to him after he defeated the Dark Lord?" And you still didn't tell me why you played that terrible prank to make everyone think you were dead. Were you just copying the boy hero? Naruto pointed out after a few minutes as he scrunched up his face in confusion. Harry closed his eyes and sagged back against the couch with a sigh before he quietly answered. His name is Harry Potter and he is still trying to pick up the pieces of his life after fighting in a war he never wanted to take part in but could not walk away from for fear he would lose those he held dear. Chapter 8, Naruto's Story. Friday, August 13, 1999, night. Number 12 Grimmauld Place, London, England. Naruto was having trouble processing what his cousin had just revealed to him. Part of him couldn't believe he hadn't seen the answer earlier because the moment Harry told him that he was the boy hero from the story, it became glaringly obvious based upon everything he'd learned about his cousin over the past week. Raised in a shinobi village like he was, Naruto understood war far better than most children his age did, though that didn't mean he knew the darker side of war, and therefore had a good idea of what Harry had been through during the course of his war. He also understood his cousin's pain of growing up alone and unloved, surrounded by cold and hateful eyes. Naruto's blue eyes shimmered with unshed tears as he recalled the terrible hours he'd spent locked in the closet before Dudley had let him out. He could only imagine how much worse it would have been to have to live in that tiny closet for 10 long years with no one to talk to him or let him out. Naruto glanced up as Harry stirred and the moment he saw the pain and loneliness in Harry's eyes, something he'd not noticed earlier because of how well Harry had hid it, he threw himself at his cousin and hugged him for all he was worth. Harry tensed the moment Naruto's arms had wrapped around him and Naruto immediately began to think that he'd done something wrong only to feel the man suddenly relax and wrap his arms around Naruto in return. It was the first hug the two of them had shared and for the first time in his life, Naruto finally felt like he'd found his one true home. He'd found his family at last and he just knew that he would be staying with Harry and Teddy for a long, long time. The two of them sat there holding each other for a long time before something that had been bothering him for a while had Naruto asking, Harry, what is magic? It is a form of energy. But what does magic mean? I don't know that word. Oh, Harry exclaimed as he looked at Naruto in surprise. Are you saying that you don't know what magic is because you don't know what the corresponding Japanese word for magic is? Ah no. I don't know. Maybe. I am such an idiot. I never once considered that the reason you weren't asking me questions about all of the spells I used was due to the word magic being lost in translation. You speak English so well that I sometimes forget that you are still learning the language. Now, what was the incantation for that translation spell that Hermione taught me the other day? Oh, yes, I remember now. Naruto, once I cast the spell on myself, I want you to start talking in Japanese so that the spell can pick up enough of the language to properly translate. It won't matter what you say so long as you keep talking. Alright, here we go, Redo Lingua. How will you know whether or not the jutsu you just used will work or not? Naruto curiously asked in Japanese as he eyed Harry carefully as he tried to determine whether or not anything had happened. What exactly is it that the jutsu you used is supposed to do anyway? And how long am I supposed to just keep talking? Sometimes the things you do and say make absolutely no sense at all, Itoko. That was why rule number 4 was the most important rule for you to remember. I won't know that I'm confusing you if you don't tell me. Harry dryly pointed out in perfect Japanese with just the slightest trace of an accent. Whoa, when did you learn Japanese, Itoko? I didn't. The spell I cast on myself allows me to speak and understand Japanese for as long as the spell is active. The only drawbacks are that I can only use the spell one time per day, for only one language at a time. And the first language I hear is the language that I will hear and understand. So, if I use it and someone speaks the wrong language, then I will have wasted an entire day because I can't cast the spell again to pick up a different language. On the plus side, the more I use the spell for a single language and the higher the number of different people I hear speaking the language, the faster I will be able to learn that language until I reach the point where I no longer need to cast the spell. At least that was what Hermione told me. Sugoi. I didn't know that there were techniques that could do that. I didn't either until Hermione found the spell for me after I mentioned that you were still learning English. She thought it would be useful in case there was ever a time when you and I had trouble getting our point across due to a simple misunderstanding in translation between Japanese and English. How come you can only use it once a day? Any spell that affects the brain is dangerous because it is very easy to mess up someone's mind if you make a mistake and the translation spell actually temporarily rewires the brain of the individual it is cast upon in order to replace the person's native language with the first language they hear. The person won't ever forget or lose their native language, but for the duration that the spell is active they will have difficulty speaking or understanding someone speaking any language except the one that the spell targeted. Hermione would be able to explain the theory behind the spell better. I just know how to cast it and the basics of what it is supposed to do. That is so cool, Databeo. I wish I'd had a technique like that when I was first learning English. It took me and my Kage Bunshin weeks before I could read, write, and speak it even a little bit, and the lessons were so confusing at first. It takes most people years to learn how to speak any new language fluently, so the fact that you can speak English well enough to pass as a native English speaker after studying the language for less than a year is nothing short of impressive. Since you didn't use magic to speed up the process, Harry pointed out with noticeable pride. Magic? Naruto asked skeptically. Yes, magic. What else did you think it was I was doing each time I used my wand? Harry inquired as he held up said wand and wriggled it back and forth to draw Naruto's eyes to the stick for the first. I thought you were just using chakra, like the shinobi back home do, Naruto weakly replied as he continued to stare at the wand in Harry's hand. You aren't just fattening me and Teddy up so you can eat us for dinner, are you? What? No. Where would you get an idea like that? You just said you were a witch, and I read that witches feed kids lots of candy until they're fat enough to eat and then they push them in the oven to cook them up for supper, Naruto nervously replied. And you've been giving me and Teddy lots of candy and stuff lately. Ah, the story of Hansel and Gretel, Harry murmured in understanding. That was a German fairy tale written by a pair of brothers that traveled all over Europe collecting folk tales. The tale of Hansel and Gretel is actually based upon a hag, not a witch. And the word witch refers to a woman that can perform magic. Men are typically called wizards. So there will be no eating of children by me or any of my friends. I much prefer treacle tart. Naruto eyed Harry carefully for a moment before he relaxed and muttered, okay. I'm rather curious as to what you meant when you said that you thought I was using chakra. What exactly is chakra, and what is it that a person does with chakra? Irika-sensei said that chakra was made up of a person's mental energy and a person's physical energy. When a shinobi combines both mental and physical energy in the correct amounts, it creates chakra. A shinobi uses his chakra to perform different kinds of jutsu. He can make himself stronger or faster, or use it to climb up a wall or walk on the water. Irika said that everyone was born with a chakra network, but not everyone develops their chakra coils. You're talking about a person's life force, Harry gasped as he sat up straighter. Someone taught you how to use your life force to affect the world around you. Merlin, Maeve, and Mungo preserve me from the idiocy of others. You could have seriously injured yourself if you drew too much at once, or worse, killed yourself because you used up your entire life force and didn't leave yourself enough physical energy to keep your heart beating. All shinobi learned how to mold their chakra as soon as they were old enough to attend the academy, Naruto pointed out as he eyed Harry carefully, since his cousin was obviously upset. The earlier a person starts learning, the easier it is for them to learn, and the easier it is for them to increase the size of their chakra reserves. If you're too old when you start learning, then your chakra coils will stay rather small and you'll get tired really quickly, which means you'll never be a very good shinobi. That's not entirely true. Harry started to counter before he trailed off. Well, I suppose it would be true for someone without a magical core, since they don't have the ability to heal the internal stress caused by forcefully expanding the coils of your life force. Harry paused again and frowned as he recalled the strange clones that Naruto had made. You went to one of those academies. How old were you when they sent you to the academy? 6. And just how long do you have to attend lessons at the academy? At least 4 years, but most people stay in the academy until they're at least 12. You can't graduate unless you can pass the test. Okay, that's not as bad as I thought it was. For a moment it sounded like the village you lived in was turning children into soldiers. Well, it still sounds like that, but I don't suppose I have any room to complain, seeing as how I was basically trained as a child soldier from the moment I entered the wizarding world, and I was only 11 at the time. Ah no, what is magic? Is it like chakra at all? Where does it come from? Can anyone use it? No, magic is nothing like chakra. What you call chakra is what we call life force. Magic, on the other hand, is a form of pure energy that allows the wielder to alter the world around them. Every single life form, including plants and animals, are born with a life force, while only a small number are born with a magical core. The magical core is where a person's magic is made and stored. The larger a person's core, the more magic they can produce and store. And only those who are born with a magical core can use magic. Do you think it's possible that I have one of those core thingies? I'm afraid not. The magic in our family was passed down through my grandmother's side of the family and not through our common ancestor. Does that mean that I will have to leave? Absolutely not. Harry adamantly declared as he reached out to cup Naruto's face. It does not matter to me whether or not you have magic, all that matters is that we are family. And we will always be family, no matter what. Naruto stared up at his cousin with wide blue eyes that glistened with suppressed tears as he felt an unexpected warmth fill him in response to his cousin's declaration. Fear filled the 8-year-old a heartbeat later as he recalled the terrible monster that was contained inside of him, and he pressed his hands over the hidden seal on his stomach. Guilt ate away at him over the knowledge that he was hiding the presence of the Kyuubi from his cousin. He was also terrified that his cousin would hate him the moment he learned about the nine-tailed fox. Is there something wrong, Naruto? I don't want you to hate me, Naruto confessed in a tiny voice as he pulled away from Harry and curled in on himself. I could never hate you, Naruto, Harry gently corrected as he reached out to run his fingers through Naruto's hair, and Naruto flinched away from the contact out of habit. The hand fell away and Naruto swallowed thickly and squeezed his eyes closed as he just knew he'd made his cousin angry. I might get upset once in a while over something you say or do because everyone loses their temper from time to time, but just because I get angry doesn't mean that I will hate you. That's only because you don't know what I am. And what is it you think you are? Because all I see is a boy who had enough courage to make a journey halfway around the world all alone to meet with distant relatives he didn't even know. I'm a monster, a demon and a freak. No, you are not, Harry firmly stated as he scooped Naruto up onto his lap and wrapped his arms around him. Aunt Petunia was wrong to call you those names. It wasn't just Cousin Petunia that called me those things, Naruto confessed as he burrowed his face against Harry's chest. He was feeling torn between basking in the comfort his cousin was offering him and suffering under the guilt, pain, and fear he felt over his past treatment at the hands of the villagers and most of the shinobi of Konoha. 2 seconds later, he gave in to the need and desire for someone to accept him for him, and he began to pour his heart, and therefore his life story, out. Everyone always hated me and called me names or beat me up if I couldn't get away from them when they chased me. I didn't know why they hated me until I found out the truth about the Kyuubi and learned that Gigi lied to me. He said the villagers were just angry because I played pranks on them, but they hated me long before I started playing pranks. He let them beat me up, chase me out of the stores, charge me extra money for rotten food, and call me terrible names when he could have ordered them to stop because he was the Hokage. He said he cared about me and told me that the villagers would like me one day, but if he lied about everything else, then he could have lied about that too. I know he lied to me about my parents. He said he didn't know who they were and he let me think that they hated me like everyone else. All I ever wanted to know was if I belonged to someone, and he let me think that no one wanted me. After I learned the truth, I couldn't stay there any longer. I was so angry. I took back everything that belonged to my parents before I tricked the Umbu on duty with a Kage Bunshin and ran away to find my uncle. I was so scared that he wouldn't want me either, but I had nowhere else to go and no one I could trust. I was so scared once I escaped the village. I thought for sure someone would figure out that I'd run away and hunt me down to drag me back to the village. There were so many times I feared I got lost as I made my way to the portal to the outer countries, and I was chased by bandits once. I almost turned back a couple of times because I was so scared, but I didn't want to give up, and I was more scared of the trouble I'd be in if I did go back. I was also scared that everything I'd read about the outer countries was nothing more than a trick that someone was playing on me. I was so happy when I learned it wasn't a trick after I found the portal and opened it with my chakra. Once I was on this side of the portal, I got scared all over again when I finally saw my first city. It was so huge and the air was dirty and smelly and the cars were frightening and loud. I almost wanted to run back through the portal, but I was determined to find Kichiroaji. I was there for a couple of days before one of my clones ran into Naoki Gigi and he asked me to meet with him so he could help me. He said it was his job to help those that traveled through the portals. Naoki told me my uncle had passed through the same portal that I did, and he spent a long time looking for him while I was being taught all kinds of things they said I would need to know to stay on this side of the portal. They even let me practice the stuff I learned in the academy and showed me the right way to do all of the taijutsu stances I was supposed to have learned at the academy, only I had been taught wrong by my old instructors because they all hated me. It took Naoki Gigi a long time to find out what had happened to Kichiroaji, and he told me that Kichiro married a girl named Rose and they had 2 girls before they died in a car crash. Naoki thought Lily had died because she disappeared after she turned 11, but he found Petunia and he bought me my tickets and made sure I had all my paperwork and stuff, so that I could meet her. I was so scared at first when I got on the plane, but it was so cool to see everything from so high up in the air. And the world was so big. I didn't think it would be that big, but it was, and there were so many big cities. I could see all of the lights at night and it looked like someone had spread fireworks all over the ground. Everything was so perfect, and then Petunia was so mean. She knew what I was the moment she looked at me. She called me the same names that the villagers had called me and looked at me with those cold eyes. Then she shoved me in the closet and Vernon talked about killing me and burying me in the backyard when I yelled at them to let me out. They were just like everyone else, except Dudley. Dudley was nice and he gave me food and let me out of the closet and he let me stay in his room. And even though he told me you were really nice, I was so scared that you would hate me too. Naruto paused as the memories of the week he spent with the Dursleys flashed before him and he couldn't quite suppress the shudder that ran through him. He was so wrapped up in those terrible memories that he forgot he wasn't alone until he was drawn back to the present by the feel of a hand rubbing circles on his back. Tears burned the back of his eyes as he imagined his cousin shoving him away once he learned the truth about the monster inside of him. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon used to call me all kinds of names when I lived with them, Harry quietly confessed as he continued to rub Naruto's back. The one they used most often and the one I hated the most was Freak. At the time I didn't understand why they kept calling me a freak and telling me that I was unnatural until I learned about my magic and that they had been aware that both of my parents were magical. Aunt Petunia was jealous of me and my mother and the things that magic allowed us to do, and that jealousy eventually turned to hate. The reason why she called you those names was because she thought you were a wizard just like me after your clone was destroyed when she hid it. All she saw was another person that had been granted an ability she desperately wished had been hers and she took it out on you. She was wrong. They were all wrong. There is nothing wrong with you and you are not a monster or a freak, you are a child. And like any other child, you deserve to be protected and cherished. I'm not like other children, Naruto protested as he leaned back to meet Harry's gaze with turbulent sapphire eyes. What makes you think you are any different than any other child out there? I have a demon inside of me. Naruto, just because a bunch of stupid people called you terrible names, doesn't mean that you. It's true. My father made me a demon the day I was born. What are you talking about, Naruto? The day I was born the nine-tailed demon fox attacked Konoha and nearly destroyed it. The Sandaime Hokage, my father, fought the demon and he was supposed to have killed it. The instructors at the academy told all of the children that the Sandaime killed the Kyuubi, but they were all lying. Demons can't be killed. The Sandaime sealed the Kyuubi inside of me so he could save the village. That's why the village hates me, I'm the Kyuubi. My father turned me into the Kyuubi. I'm not buying it. There is no way you could possibly be a demon, for one thing. You don't look anything like a fox aside from the whisker marks on your cheeks, and those look more like tattoos. You also haven't attacked anyone during the time we've been together, and I'm pretty certain a demon would not laugh and play with Teddy. But I have the seal on my stomach and the notes and stuff I found in my file said I was the container for the Kyuubi and that my mother had the Kyuubi in her. Until it got out and tried to destroy Konoha and she died. Okay, now I'm really confused. What exactly is this demon fox supposed to be? How exactly is a demon supposed to be sealed inside of a person, and why the hell would anyone seal a demon inside of a person? I don't know, Naruto nervously replied as he sensed Harry's growing frustration. Do you know who will be able to answer my questions? The old man probably knows, but I don't want to go back there. My parents would probably know too, but they're dead. What about the files you mentioned? Would they have some of the answers I am looking for? Maybe. Oh, I know. I have a bunch of scrolls and stuff I copied that might explain things better, Naruto replied as he jumped up from Harry's lap and darted out of the room. He rushed up to the bedroom that Harry had allowed him to stay in since they first arrived and tore through his things until he found the giant scroll that he'd sealed all of his things into. The moment he wrapped his arms around the scroll, he headed back down to the parlor where he found Harry sitting right where he'd left him. The 8-year-old dashed right up to his cousin and dumped the huge scroll on his lap. Everything I took from Konoha is sealed in there, Naruto explained when he noticed the confused look on Harry's face. In Japanese, Naruto, I am unable to understand English as long as the translation spell I cast earlier remains active. Oh, Gomen, Itoko, I forgot. Everything I took from the village before I ran away is inside of this scroll, Naruto stated as he untied the string that held the scroll shut and unrolled it to reveal the rice paper watercolor painting that hid the actual seals. Oh, I forgot about the painting that Naoki Gigi stuck to the paper to hide the seals. Naruto channeled chakra into the painting to release the seal that was holding it in place and carefully separated the painting from the scroll and rolled it up so that it could be replaced on the storage scroll if the need arose. He then bit down on his thumb hard enough to draw blood that he spread across each of the seals that were holding anything that he thought might have the information that would help Harry understand the monster he had been turned into. Tears filled his eyes and his hands shook with each seal he released as he struggled against the desire to pretend the entire thing was a prank so he could hide the truth from his cousin. There was a part of him that needed to protect his cousin from the monster inside of him though, and the only way that he knew to do that was to make his cousin understand just how dangerous it was to keep him around. Even if the older boy ended up hating him because of the Kyuubi, at least Naruto would always have the memories of the last few weeks to buoy him when the pain of losing his only family threatened to drown him. In a matter of seconds, a huge pile of books, scrolls, and folders were piled up all around the two cousins. That's everything, I think, Naruto murmured as he glanced at the haphazard mound of stuff he'd unsealed. It's going to be a long night, Harry sighed as he eyed the pile of books, files, and scrolls. How did you fit all of that stuff inside of that scroll anyway? I drew storage seals to hold it. Seals? What exactly are seals? I guess they're kind of like special drawings made from ink, blood, and chakra that do certain things. I wonder if those seal things are anything like runes. I'll have to remember to ask Hermione the next time I speak to her. Harry mused before he grimaced at the pile of information that he was going to have to sort through. In the meantime, I guess I'd better start going through all of this stuff so that I can get a clearer picture of what you were talking about earlier. Before I can do that though, I'm going to have to see if I can find a translation spell since I can't read Japanese. Didn't you already use a translation spell? Yes, but that spell only targets speech, not the written language, meaning it only targets what I hear, not what I see. So, unless you want to spend the rest of the night reading out loud to me, I'm going to need to make copies of everything you have here and translate it into English. Naruto bit his lip as he glanced around him at all of the stuff he'd unsealed from his scroll and contemplated whether or not he should leave Harry to translate it on his own. A year ago, he never would have considered reading any of the stuff he'd brought with him. He'd hated book learning because it was so boring and because he didn't really know how to read very well since I could only teach him so much between serving the other customers. That had been before he'd had all of his lessons with Naoki and his other instructors in Asahikawa though. In the end, having any excuse to spend just a little more time at his cousin's side before he was chased away the moment his cousin learned the terrible truth was enough for Naruto to ask, which one do you want me to read to you first? Why don't we start with the file on our family? I'd like to learn more about the relatives I never knew, Harry suggested as he waved his wand at the pile of stuff surrounding Naruto and caused everything to jump about until it was all neatly arranged in several organized stacks by media type. Okay, Naruto hesitantly agreed as he picked up the small stack of folders and climbed up onto the couch beside his cousin so that the older boy could see the pictures in the files. The 8-year-old spent next 3 hours reading off the information provided on the birth certificates, death certificates, medical records, and other official documents tucked inside of the file he'd stolen. He also answered as many of Harry's questions as he could. At the end of those 3 hours, Harry sent Naruto to bed for the night and the blonde reluctantly obeyed. That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.